class I taught, contextualization, right? You have to bring in the idea of how do you contextualize 1 Corinthians to P&G today. Learning outcomes. Can we, the microphone's there. Can you start and read the first one and then pass the microphone and I can make it bigger. Where's my mouse? Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
It's okay. Okay. Hello, one. Describe the historical, cultural, and literary context of
Corinth.
Corinth and First Corinthians.
Okay. Number 2. We need to pass some glasses out for everyone.
Interpret and exegetical difficulties or controversial passages using grammatical, historical, and theological rules.
LO3 summarize and explain Paul's major theological themes and pastoral responses.
Apply the message of 1 Corinthians to contemporary ministry challenges in intercultural context.
Demonstrate growth in personal spiritual formation through devotional engagement with the text.
Yes, thank you. Okay. This is one of the things I have to change. I made my own, but I was told I have to pick ones from the faculty manual. So I have to change the graduate attributes to match other ones. So those are not going to be the same, so we'll skip that. You can pass the microphone and keep going, and we'll... Teaching and learning strategies.
Text immersion students will read 1 Corinthians multiple times in different translation with devotional journaling.
Okay, so we'll get down to that. We'll go on. Next one.
Lectures and discussions covering exegetical, theological, and pastoral issues, supplemented by guided group discussions.
Okay.
Case studies exploring contemporary ministry situations in light of 1 Corinthians.
Writing projects, exegetical and proclamation focused on assignments that connect scholarship with ministry practice.
Okay, so the things you'll be doing this term, devotional reading journal. So you will read all of 1 Corinthians, okay, all 16 chapters. You will read it 4 times at least, okay? Each time I want you to read it in a different translation, okay? So you can read it in Pidgin if you like, or if you have it in Talk Place, you can read it in Talk Place, that's fine, but your journal should be in English so I can read it. But you can read it in a different language, and then you can read it in 2 English translations, like if you want to read NIV or ESV, or 2 different versions, the Message, or 2 different versions. It's an English maybe you could do 3 in English and Pidgin if you don't have a talk place, or you could do 4 English, whatever you prefer. But you're going to read it 4 times, and each time you write 200 to 250 words, just answering, what did God say to me through this reading? So this is like a devotional time. You don't need to read it straight through in one sitting. You can if you want, but you can read it over a week, or a little bit each morning, each night, whatever, and just be engaging with it in prayer and thinking about what is God saying to you. Okay, so that's just short amount of writing, just talking about what's God saying to you through reading it. Okay, so at least 4 times. You can read it more if you like. Reading reflections, 6 reflections on assigned scholarly passages. So I will give you articles to read, and you will write 250 words to reflect on it. What did the article say to you? What questions do you have? How can you apply it? Thinking through that. So we'll do that 6 times. Your big paper will be exegetical paper. Okay, so this one I'll have specific passages that you can choose. So maybe I'll give 5 or 6 more difficult parts of Corinthians. So it'll be harder for you to, it'll be hard ones to think about. And you will write your big paper on doing the exegesis of it, going through and finding the meaning of it and how you can apply it to today. Okay, so this is where you'll go to the library. You'll use some commentaries. You could use if you find some scholarly articles online that talk about that passage, you can use that. But you're going to be there's a whole bunch of commentaries, and I went over to the library and looked. There's a big section on 1 Corinthians. There's a whole bunch of books you can look at and find what other people say about the passage, and you can figure out, even though you don't know Greek, if you haven't taken Greek, you can still find out what does they say about certain Greek words in there. What do they mean? Or what's the context of what's the historical context or the cultural context happening in Corinth at the time? Because a big part of why Corinthians gets often misinterpreted is because people don't understand the context of Corinthians. You have to understand, what is Corinth like? What is the city that he's writing to? What's it like to live in that city? And he's writing to the people that live in that city. So we have to understand, what is Corinth like? So you'll write this paper, do application, and that's going to be 35% of your grade. So that's the big paper to get done. And then this one is a smaller thing, but still you can work hard on it. We'll take a different passage, and I think I might let you choose. I haven't decided yet. Maybe I won't, because this one, the first one, the exegetical paper, I'll give us certain passages that you have to pick from. But the next one, maybe you can choose anything from 1 Corinthians, and you need to make something that you can use in ministry when it's done. You can take it out and you can go use it right away. Either you can write like a small group Bible study. You could write a sermon outline to go preach it. You could make a Sunday school lesson. There's maybe something else you could do if there's something you can think of, how you can go use it in ministry. So you're going to tell me, who's the audience? Is it a children's Sunday school? Is it adult Sunday school? Is it a sermon to people who already are believers, or is it a sermon to new believers? Or who are you preaching to? Who's the Bible study for? Okay, so tell me that. What are you trying to accomplish with this? What's your goal? And then you're going to do the exegesis of the passage again, thinking about the context, the grammar of it, what does it mean, and then applying it to the people that you're speaking to. So if you're speaking to children in Sunday school, you need to apply the passage, 1 Corinthians chapter 3 or whatever, you need to apply it to the children. How are you going to teach them what it means to them? Okay, so that'll be a smaller thing. It's not an exact length. This says approximately 3 pages, but it really just depends, because if you do like children in Sunday school, you might have pictures, right? It might be a bunch of pictures, and you don't have three pages of words for children. So if you're doing a sermon outline, maybe it will be 5-6 pages, right? You're preaching, so it might be longer. So it just depends on what you're doing, but this is really something that I want you to be able to take and immediately use it, okay? Actually be able to use, and something you learned right away. And then if there's be an exam, which I wish I didn't have to give an exam, but I was told I have to give you an exam. So I wish it was not an exam, but I have to do exam. Okay, and then there's some books here that we can use for talking about 1 Corinthians. There's lots of books out there you can find. So, just from your previous knowledge, what are your thoughts about 1 Corinthians? What do you think about the book or the people he's writing to? How do you, when somebody says 1 Corinthians, what do you think about?
Yes, one of the things that I kind of have a picture of about First Corinthians is a message of love. It's the book that talks more on message of love.
So 1 Corinthians 13 on love, yes. What else do you think about with Corinthians?
From what I learned is that the name Corinthians is kind of the name that is.
Hello, somebody talking. Please use the mic.
Yeah, sorry.
A little closer.
Just from how I see Corinthians from the reading, sometimes I read and I learn that this name the word Corinthians is kind of the word that has been redeemed. Actually, the word is kind of describing sexual immorality in the church.
Mm-hmm.
But the word itself is kind of a word that has been redeemed in a Christian perspective.
Yes.
It's all about the immoralities in the church, maybe. Thank you.
Yes, we will find that Corinth was a place full of sexual immorality. So Paul was addressing that. Anyone else have any thoughts on Corinth?
When we read about Corinthians, I think it's a name of a place, but the passage want to tell us about how the people in the particular place behave, and want to help us to see what we can do to help ourselves.
Okay.
Like, from my understanding, concerning Corinth, Corinth is like a big town or city, and many activities are taking place, business activities and all this. And there is a problem in the city, and Paul is trying to address the issue that concerning the Christians living in Corinth, not to involve in those all those troubles, problems that is happening in the city. Yes, that's what I thought about. It's a letter written to the Church of Corinth.
One of the things about 1 Corinthians that I think of goes along with that this is Paul's meanest letter. He's yelling at the church in a way because they're so doing bad in so many things. Unlike all the other letters that Paul writes, are very encouraging, and I'm grateful to hear the report that you're sending me. I love to hear how your church is growing. And then he writes to Corinthians and he says, "What are you guys doing? Why do you keep doing this? You keep doing all these things that are wrong." So it's the church in Corinth was having a lot of trouble because it was a stronghold of sin in Corinth. So that causes a lot of issues in the church that Paul addresses as he writes. And of course they don't quite get it, so he has to write again in 2 Corinthians. Right? He writes a second book, and there's a third letter too, as we may discuss, but we don't know what that letter says. It's the lost letter to Corinthians, because there's evidence as we read 1st, 2 Corinthians that he wrote a third letter that he talks about in his other letter, but we don't have that letter. It never made it into the Bible, so we don't know what that letter said. But Corinthians was not doing, the church in Corinth was not doing great. Before we go on, I remember most of your names, but can we go around and just have everybody say your name again, just so I can remember?
My name is Jacob Senem Marek. I come from Sepik.
Sepik.
Yes.
Oh yes. Tell me where you're from again. That's fine.
I fellowship with the SSCC.
Okay.
My name is John Senem Katu, from Ley.
From Ley?
Yeah.
Okay. Pass it back. Oh.
Okay, my name Caleb Senem Gayes. I'm from Isipik. I fellowship with SSCC.
Caleb from Sepik.
My name is Eugenia. Surname is Simewa. I'm from East New Britain, but married to Sepik.
Okay.
My name is Zilla. Benson is my surname. And I'm from Ley, Morobe, fellowship with Lutheran.
My name is Juliet. Rebecca is my surname. I'm from Hela. Fellowship with Christian Apostolic Fellowship.
My name is Jairoto Orit from West Sepik, fellowship with Baptist Union of Papua New Guinea.
I am Albert Senemewo from Sepik, fellowship with Christian Brethren Church.
My name is Paul. Surname is Yanamsa. Come from Morobe. My church is fellowship with Nazarene.
Thank you. I'm Nathaniel Pulayashi. I'm from Milimbe, and I fellowship with United Church.
My name is Danet. The surname is Nalela. I'm from Isipik Maprik. I fellowship with SSC.
Okay. Can we do Port Moresby campus?
My name is Yeti Darigi. I'm from Western Province and I fellowship with Evangelical Church of Papua New Guinea.
Good night. My name is Ako Kaipu. I am from Gulf Province, but I live in Mosby. I fellowship with United Church, Reverend Kami Memorial Church, one of the biggest church in Papua New Guinea. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Rita Saule. I am from Morobe, really from an island of CRC, and I fellowship with Evangelical Lutheran Church of Papua New Guinea. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, James.
Hello. Continue from Port Moresby. My name is Matthias, surname Kapak. I'm from Jiwaka. I fellowship with United Church.
Thank you. Lake Campus.
My name is Junior, surname Sapa from Eastern Highlands. I fellowship with ALC.
And I'm Tony, surname Nasa from Borobe Province and fellowship with Christian Brethren Church of Papua New Guinea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, do you still do a break in evening class? 5-minute break still? Okay. We'll do the break a little bit early because then we're going to watch a video and we'll discuss the video after. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do our 5-minute break now. All right, can you see a black screen in Lay and Port Moresby?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so this video is part of a series called That the World May Know, and it is a pastor and historian and archaeologist named Ray Vanderland, and he takes groups on tours through the Holy Land to show the places where the Bible stories may have taken place, or some of them where they did take place. So he shows you the places where Jesus actually walked and stood. He shows you the places from the Old Testament where David was, or where Elijah was. So he takes you to those places in his videos, and he shows you the actual places. In this video, he takes a group to Corinth to show what Corinth looks like today. So not ancient Corinth, obviously we don't have video of that, but show what does Corinth look like right now. They've done archaeology, digging, and shown things, and he gives a Bible lesson based off of Corinth as well. So let's watch this and we can see what we think and discuss it afterwards. Sorry, these don't have subtitles to read, so you have to listen close. today what it looks like right now in Israel, just this dry desert.
That's slag. It's the byproduct of copper smelting. We're standing on top of a place called Slaves Hill. The Egyptians came here to mine copper out of these mountains, and their slaves lived up here on this hill and worked the smelters, the furnaces, probably day and night. Can you imagine? In the brutal heat of this desert, probably working to death. It's what it was to be a slave. Then the time came for God to choose a people, a partner, to bring his message of healing and redemption to a broken world, to make his name known among the nations. He went to Egypt, and he chose a people. Not the Egyptians, you know, pyramids and temples and magnificent structures of all kinds. He chose the slaves, the weak, the nobodies. I can't imagine anyone would have predicted that anything positive could have ever come from that group of people. And yet that was the partner God chose and brought her here, trained her to be dependent, trusting, willing, and maybe even sensitive to others in suffering. Time passed, but God's plan didn't change. He continued to want to bring that message of healing and forgiveness to a broken world. He picked other partners, including one named Paul. Shaul, his Hebrew name. The New Testament calls him Paul. Before he sent him out with that same message, he brought him to a place like this, to the greater Arabian desert, the title in the first century for the area south of Israel. And Paul spent years being trained and learning how to bring that message. Wonder if he ever thought about the weakness of his ancestors and his own inadequacy to the task that God had called him to. And then God sent him to the Egypt of his world, to places like Philippi and Thessalonica and Athens and that great Greco-Roman city called Corinth. Join us. Let's discover how God continued to use the weakness of his partner to demonstrate his strength in a broken world. Luke writes, after this, Paul left Athens and came to Corinth. Complete, of course, in his day. It dates way before his time. That was already here. Look at those huge monolithic single drum columns of that temple. It's believed to be the temple of Apollo. So Paul came here, Corinth, a name that immediately rings with a follower of Jesus because of those two magnificent inspired letters he sent and because of the stories in the book of Acts about this place. Corinth dates back to 1000 BC. It slowly but surely became a wealthy city, reaching its apex, if you will, at the time of Periander around 600 or so BC. Its wealth and power came from the agriculture around here. You saw the vineyards as we drove through this morning. But more importantly, trade. Just below us is the Gulf of Corinth. About 5 miles south of us is the Aegean, the Saronic Gulf. And this lower part of Greece, the Peloponnese, is connected to mainland Greece by a narrow isthmus about 5 miles, 4 miles, 4.5 between those two seas. So ships were brought to one side, to the harbor at one side, Kekera on this side, and Lechian on this side, and actually loaded onto big carts and dragged on a road from one harbor to the other. Or if they were too big, the cargo was taken off, put on a cart, brought to the other side, and put on ships there. So this was a sailor's town, and it became extremely wealthy and prosperous. And then came Julius Caesar. In 44 BC, listen, Julius Caesar turned this city, Corinth, into a colony, like Philippi, but with one dramatic difference. A colony, remember, is as if you were in Rome. The laws and practices are Roman. One big difference: Philippi was populated by legionnaires, Roman Marines, people of status and stature. Here, Julius Caesar brought in slaves, freed slaves, and large numbers of poor who weren't able to make it in Rome. So this city was founded by some folks that weren't too highly regarded in the Roman world. And that, without question, taints its reputation from then on, in spite of it being Roman. There's ancient writers, I found more than one, who laugh at the people of Corinth because
I'll try to put this video on Cluster for you to watch again, but you can use this in part of your exegetical paper for historical background of Corinth, right? So Corinth is populated by slaves, freed slaves, and poor people, right? That's who he brings into Corinth and made it into a Roman colony. It was also a center of trade. You have the water on both sides, separated by only 8 kilometers is all. So they would bring the boats to one side and move the cargo to the other side and put it on another boat. So this made the city very wealthy. So they brought poor people here, but then they acquired great wealth by living there. So this is good historical information for your paper.
because of their origin. But they became wealthy and prosperous again and became known as one of the most decadent cities in the Roman Empire. Strabo writes, at one time up there on the Acropolis in the Temple of Aphrodite, 1,000 prostitutes practiced their trade. Scholars question whether that temple was as active in the Roman period of Paul's day, but there were two other, one for sure, the other they think, Aphrodite temples down here, to the point of where the word Corinthian referred to something having to do with poor morals. So Corinth was really morally, from the point of view of the Jewish people, at the absolute bottom of society in their world. Now listen, and Paul left Athens and came to Corinth. That's a strong sentence. You've got to be kidding me. What in the world does he think he might do here? And I'd like to suggest he's discouraged. At least that's how I think of it. Didn't go all that well in Athens. Oh, he got to argue with the scholars, but he doesn't leave a church behind. Listen to his first inspired letter to those here who would believe the message. When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I did not come with eloquence or wisdom. I wonder if he's thinking the way I did in Athens. As I proclaimed to you the testimony about God, I came to you in weakness and in fear and with much trembling. And he came here alone in a pretty tough place to bring the word of Jesus to this decadent Roman colony. And I wonder if, as he came up the road, being Jewish, he wasn't thinking about Bible passages. The wisdom of the wise will perish, and the intelligence of the intelligent will vanish. Who would it be that would hear his message, not only with their mind, but with their heart? Let me show you something. Come. Just down the hill from the Apollo Temple are the meager remains of what in its day was a magnificent theater. It's never been restored, so it's not a lot to see today. But out in front of that theater, in Paul's day, a new entrance plaza had been created. And on that entrance plaza is something quite interesting that actually is mentioned in the Paul story. All right, we've come down a couple of 100 yards from the Apollo Temple where we started. We're standing by the ruins of the theater of Corinth, and as you can see, there's not much left of that. Here, a plaza was built. It allowed people to congregate outside the theater and then enter. When they uncovered this, they found in the plaza an inscription. Look at it a moment. Part of it is missing, but here it says, Erastus, the proconsul, to receive the aedileship, the office of aedila, paved or laid this pavement out of his own pocket, by his own expense. So someone laid this pavement. Now let's unpack what that inscription means. Aedileship was an important office, really second only to the mayor. The aedileship is the director of public works. What raises your eyebrows is that one of the people who responds, one of the Corinthians who responds to Paul's teaching is a man named Erastus. In fact, he's called the city treasurer. Now, if it is the same person, and I've not read a scholar who doesn't think so, Erastus is a rare name in ancient time. And he is one of the first to believe. Paul may have walked in discouraged, but he's certainly attracting the who's who of Corinth.
Isn't that interesting? The name, the Erastus from the Bible, is inscribed in the stone right there in Corinth still. So if you went to Corinth, you could find Erastus's name there, and he's also the same Erastus from the Bible, right there in the stone. I find that amazing. When people question the Bible, whether it's true or not, like we have it in the name right there, written in stone, of the same person who's described in the Bible as being the director of the city.
I think this is an unusual example. I think Erastus the exception. Listen, brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. By Jesus through me, of course. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. For God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise, and he chose the weak to shame the strong. He chose the lowly and the despised and things that are not to nullify the things that are, so no one may have anything to boast about. So we know two things. about Paul's ministry in Corinth. He came in fear and trembling and weakness. And the people who believed, from the Roman point of view, the unimportant and the nobodies, the slave, the former slave, the poor, all Erastus, of course, but I'd like to suggest by Paul's own testimony, Erastus more an exception than the rule. So what on earth is going to come of this mission by a man who's discouraged and collecting a community that in the eyes of the Corinthians are never going to amount to anything? What will happen when God begins to use human weakness to show his strength? You know, it brings me back to that day we stood in the desert remembering Mount Sinai and thought about God picking slaves to carry out the mission. Maybe Paul began to realize he was more like Moses than he had imagined. So let's join him in the Forum of Corinth. Come. Welcome to the Forum of Corinth. On this side, down the middle of the Forum, a whole series of platforms, including the Bema here, where official things happen, like announcements and judgments and audiences. On the far end, the Imperial Temple, way up in the trees over there. In the middle, an Imperial altar. There's no doubt who's Lord and God here. This is the Forum where so much of life was taking place. So Paul probably entered the Forum. It says that he was involved in tent making, so he could have had one of these shops, either here or on one of the side streets. Now let's set that mission back into its context. Paul had been commissioned by Jesus himself to be a light to the Gentiles. But as we've been learning, that mission didn't start with Paul, or even with Jesus. Remember, Jewish people wore tassels, because way back at Mount Sinai, God had said, "You will be for me a kingdom," that is, you will extend my reign every time you obey me, "of priests." Their mission was to put God on display to a broken world. We also noted at Sinai that to strengthen them, encourage them, or better, empower them, God said, "And when you do, I will live among you." And we stood by the tabernacle as God had them build a tent and then literally came down and lived among them. And we noticed throughout Jewish history that principle was important. First the tabernacle, then in the temple, then eventually the temple was destroyed and a new one built. And then came that day of Pentecost when God said, "I have a new temple, my community of faith." Now Paul's going to pick up that metaphor in Corinth. And he is going to call the new believers here, the colony, he is going to call them the temple of God's Spirit. Remember the history of Corinth, totally destroyed by Mummius in 146 BC. Slowly built itself back up, and then came Julius Caesar and said, "Corinth, you will be my colony." He populated it with a whole bunch of nobodies, But for the next 100 years, he poured a tremendous amount of money, he and his successors, into building this place. So when Paul walked in, it's right at the end of that 100-year-long construction period. Paul would have seen construction going on everywhere. Listen a moment in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 10. He says this, "Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple and that God's Spirit lives in you?" So he picks up on the Hebrew Bible idea that God wants to live among his people who will be a kingdom of priests, yes, even in this unbelievably decadent place called Corinth. And he says, I laid the first stone, the cornerstone, the tried and tested stone. And they all went, yeah, we've seen that all around us for the last 50 years. Good point, Paul. We understand what temple building means. Now remember, in that whole context, Paul has entered in weakness and trembling. Discouragement maybe even. Have you ever been in a ministry moment where you were discouraged? Where it just didn't seem to work? Where you somehow just didn't seem adequate? Where in some way it just wasn't happening? How did God show up? Let's go to Acts. Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker as they were, he stayed and worked with them. Every Sabbath he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. Now think of what happened when he got here. He came alone. Owns nothing except a bag on his back with a few tent making tools. Tent making may have been linen or leather or canvas or all three. And guess what? He meets two Jews. 6 times they're mentioned in the Bible. 4 times it's Priscilla first, or Prisca as Paul calls her, and Aquila second. Twice it's Aquila first and Priscilla second. Equally important, in other words. And guess what? They're already believers in Jesus. We know they're not his first converts here. They're already believers, and they've already set up a shop doing tent making. Now tell me that wasn't encouraging to Paul. He comes alone wondering, how on earth am I going to conduct this business in this place? How will I support? First people he meets, a Jewish couple who have the same faith he does, who take him in and become for him house church. And then it says he went to the synagogue and reasoned on the Sabbath day. Now you were with me in the museum and you saw an inscription. It says the synagogue of the Hebraioi, the Hebrews. I wonder if Paul went in the synagogue and went, my word, we've not only got the word of God here, we've got a community that comes right from Israel itself who are ready to discuss and debate the faith. Tell me he wasn't encouraged that God's presence in the book and in those who had bowed the knee to the God of Israel were already here in Corinth. Then it says the Jewish people became abusive. They didn't agree with his message. So Paul says, okay, now I go to the Gentiles. Jesus said the Jew first and then the Gentiles. Listen to what happens next. He left the synagogue and went next door to the house of Titius Justus, a worshiper of God. Crispus, the synagogue ruler, and his entire household believed in the Lord, and many of the Corinthians who heard him believed and were baptized. The community is growing. Fear not, Paul. Don't be crushed in spirit. I am with you. Remember that ancient story of the prophet Elijah who sat under a shrub in the desert? He had just seen fire come down from heaven on Mount Carmel. It didn't do what he thought it should do and turn the people's hearts back to God. So he headed out into the desert and basically quit. God came to him and he said, Elijah, don't do that. Get on your feet, walk to Mount Sinai. And at Mount Sinai, God met him. And basically, in that experience, said, Elijah, I am with you. Don't be discouraged. There are 7,000 people who still serve me. This is almost exactly alike. One night, the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. Do not be afraid, Paul. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one is going to attack and harm you, because I have many people in this city. So Paul stayed for 1.5 years. And then he's accused by certain ones from the synagogue. They brought him to court. Now, we're not exactly sure where that was. A very likely place is this Bema. Imagine it, covered with marble, beautiful colonnade on the top with a roof. The judge isn't going to sit out in the sun on a hot day or in the rain on a rainy day. And Paul standing on the pavement in front of it, much as Jesus had done before Pilate. And they present their accusations to a man named Gallio. And they press charges. Gallio said to the Jews, if you were making a complaint about some misdemeanor or crime, it would be reasonable for me to listen to you. But since it involves questions about words and names and your own law, settle it yourselves. I will not be a judge. And he set Paul free. And I think at that point, if Paul had been discouraged, he must have felt like a lion. Because when God is with you, whatever the mission, it happens the way he wants it to. I like to think of it this way. Paul came here in weakness. The people who first believed, many of them were the weak in all kinds of ways. God loves to use human weakness. There's a great line in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, about the saints who've lived it fully. It goes like this, and their weakness was turned to strength. You see, it's when you discover your weakness that you become strong. It's when Abraham and Sarah realized they would need a miracle to have a baby, and they knew they were too weak to do anything about it. That's when they became strong. It's when Moses realized he couldn't speak, and he was weak, and that God would go with him and give him the words and the mouth, that Moses became strong. It's when Israel stood at the Red Sea and realized they couldn't swim and they had no boats, but they started walking toward the water anyway, knowing that only God could do something about it. That's when they became strong. His weakness was turned to strength in this city. Guess what? It worked. A church, a colony, the temple of the Holy Spirit, right here among the temples of Caesar and Apollo and Aphrodite and all the rest. It worked. And brothers and sisters, I'd like to suggest we live in the de-Christianizing era of Western culture. Those Christian, Judeo-Christian things we've taken so for granted have largely evaporated. But don't lose hope. And our hope is not that we win the next election. Our hope is not that we gain a majority. Our hope is not that we think of the right arguments. Our hope is that we recognize our weakness that when we're weak, when we're the minority, when we're the community of nobodies who are willing to put our God on display in all of our weakness, His glory. And so guess what? Here's the record book. Corinth, it's the slave, Achaicus. It's Fortunatus and Quartus. Those names sound like freedmen, former slaves. It's unknown, Lucius, Jason, Sosipater, Phoebe. It's you and me. And in their weakness, the power of God. He loves to use the weak. So, there will be moments when you're Paul and discouraged. Wait for the Aquila and Priscilla. Wait for Timothy and Titus to show up. Wait for God to meet you under a shrub in the desert and say, "Don't you quit on me." But there will also be moments when you need to be Aquila and Priscilla in the life of someone else. When you need to be willing to be the one that opens your heart, your home, your life to lift someone else up who's discouraged. And when you do, as His name is known, a temple is built, whether in Corinth or Philippi or Philadelphia or Los Angeles, Dallas or Chicago or anywhere else. And the kingdom comes. Or anywhere else. And the kingdom comes.
Okay, so we have the city of Corinth. Can you picture all of these? These are the bottoms of all the buildings. So they're all built up, big columns, stone roofs. Up here on the top of the hill is a huge temple to, he says Aphrodite. I always had heard it Aphrodite, who is the Greek god of love and sexuality. That's where there's 1,000 prostitutes in that temple up on this hill. And the way that the people of Corinth worship Aphrodite is they go there and they have sex with the prostitutes. That's how you worship her. And so this is the city that Paul builds a church in, and the city that he writes to later. When we see all of the writing against sexual immorality, he's writing to the city that worships Aphrodite as their main god of the city. She gets the temple on top of the hill that everybody can see. Their main worship is to her. And so that's why we see so much writing about sexual immorality and about love in Corinthians, because he's talking to a people that live in a city of sin and the wrong kind of love. So what did you think of the video? Any thoughts that you had about Corinth? Have you seen videos or pictures of ancient Greece before, where these columns are? And is this new to you? Have you seen what they look like, with the temples and the columns? So you can kind of get a picture of where Paul is and who he's writing to. This is much different than most of the New Testament in Israel. We have Nazareth and Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and the structures are way much different. This is a much richer city. It's got, in order to have all these stone buildings, they have to have a lot of money, and the stonemasons that carve these, and it's a much wealthier place. They have lots of money here. And with lots of money, they have lots of sin. As he said in the video, that Corinth was the lowest of the moral places. So if you talked about something being very poor in morality, you could say it was like Corinth, or it was like a Corinthian, because that was the same thing as saying they have very bad morals. They're very sinful people. If you talk about something being, oh, that village over there is like Corinthian, is like Corinth. So you're saying they're very immoral people. There we go. We have contrasting cities there, both possibly immoral cities. I don't know what city that is actually, but so some more geographical and historical information for you. So Corinth was well known for its tainted social and moral reputation. In Paul's day, it was also a strategic and prosperous city because of its identity as a Roman colony and its location between the Gulf of Corinth and the Saronic Gulf on the Aegean Sea. The biannual Isthmian Games, so it's kind of like Olympics. They had the ancient Greek Olympics that started, our modern Olympics started in ancient Greece. But this is not the Olympics. This is another one where they do the same. They do throwing contests and running contests. The Isthmian Games, and the worship of Aphrodite attracted many thousands of visitors, athletes, and pleasure seekers to Corinth. The Isthmus of Corinth was also provided the only land access between Athens and the mainland of Greece. Corinth's location as a trade center, both in land and sea, brought great wealth, slaves, and goods as far away as Egypt, Gaul, Spain, and the Middle East. As the capital of Achaia and most prosperous city in Greece, Corinth was perhaps the most important city Paul ever visited. Paul had encountered with intellectual and philosophical influencers of the Greco-Roman culture in Athens, and now he came to Greece. So before he comes to Corinth, he goes to Athens, where he preaches but does not have much success. And then he goes to Corinth. Does anyone else have any thoughts on Corinth or Paul's time there?
I got a question, Stephen.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just looking at thank you for the video clip that shared a lot of insights to our understanding of the background. My question is, I was looking at the destruction of the city, and how is the city of Corinth was who actually thought, like, is that part of the destruction in the fall of Jerusalem? 70 years after, or is there another force that?
This would not have been part of the fall of Jerusalem. Let me see if the internet can tell me when Corinth was destroyed. Let's see. So my guess, I don't know the answer to that, but my guess would be that Corinth fell when the Roman Empire started to fall, which would be like 1,000 years after Jesus. So it would be like when the Roman Empire started to have trouble. You had the Turks, like the Ottoman Empire from Turkey, modern day Turkey, coming to invade Rome, and you had the Romans called